What is up, everybody? Hazeblade here, and today we're going to be taking a look at Nicholai's builds options, and we're going to be going over a couple of different branches of builds. And in our first video today, we're going to be starting with the Firearm Efficiency build. Now, there are many different ways of doing this build, so as far as how you're constructing your build, I'm probably going to be doing multiple videos about the Firearm Efficiency build, but I'm going to show you the core build that I use, and then in future videos we're going to be changing this build up a little bit to show you what your options are and what is suitable to your playstyle. So here's the core Firearm Efficiency build that I've been rolling with. So with Nemesis, we're going to be using the Relentless perk, which shortens the cooldown when survivors are tracked or defeated. We're going to be using tracking rounds, so that way every time we hit a survivor they refresh their track. We, of course, are going to be using Firearm Efficiency, which is the core concept of this build, which decreases the cost of firearm-related cards by 1. And in the second and third areas, we're going to be unlocking the high-caliber rifle turret and the machine gun turret, respectively, which is ultimately, with the Firearm Efficiency perk, going to allow us to stack some things together to get these turrets out at really low cost. So let's take a look at our equipment. So one thing that Nicholai is very bad at is bioenergy generation. So rather than putting a gen mod in my hand, which is potentially going to bog down my hand and when I'm trying to string combos together, the miniature reactor is going to just allow me to use equipment in its place. And I call this version of the Firearm Efficiency build the max damage build, because we're putting 3 large caliber barrels over top of the bioreactor, and that's going to give us an insane amount of damage that most of the time we can 2 to 3 shot survivors with a high caliber rifle when we have these stacked together. So taking a look at the deck, we're going to be using tracker mines, and that's pretty much the only trap that we're going to be using at all, because with the air cannon and the immobilizing rounds, that's going to allow us to do most of our CC without the need of a leg hold trap or anything like that. And then the majority of the build is, of course, going to be the turret. So we're going to have the rifle turret in area 2. We're going to have the high caliber rifle in area 3. We're going to have the machine gun turret. And then I'll be controlling a machine gun and a high caliber rifle myself, while trying to beef those up with a shield and trying to get these cards to be as cheap as possible. So in order to get these cards to be as cheap as possible, we're of course going to be using an efficiency mod for firearms. So that's going to prevent us, rather than using that biogen efficiency, or not efficiency mod, but the biogen mod, this is going to allow us to still be able to play 3 cards in our hand at a time, rather than bogging it down to 2. So then to get these cards coming out a lot cheaper, because all 5 of these are affected by the energy booster and the efficiency mod. The energy booster is going to reduce the cost of all of these by 2, which means that we're going to be getting 1 cost air cannons, 1 cost immobilizing rounds, and when you combine the energy booster with the efficiency mod, all 3 of these are also going to be 1 cost. So we're going to be able to cycle these very quickly every time we draw an energy booster. And on top of that, we have a discount. So in the event that we're trying to clear other cards out of our hand, for instance, the electromagnetic shield or the energy booster itself, we can now start stringing these combos together. And in area 2 and 3, when we get the turrets that are more expensive, we can actually get those turrets as well down to a very low cost in conjunction with using discount along with the energy booster. So that's going to be the goal, is to try to get those costs as low as possible and start cycling turrets through the deck as quickly as possible. Now, with this build, there's going to be a lot of stuff that ends very, very quickly. This is an incredibly powerful build. So what our goal is through this process is to just continue cycling that deck while using our preset, which we're about to get into, to slow the survivors down while you're continuing to cycle your deck. So let's take a look at the presets. I'm not going to show all 4 presets, but I'm going to use the Abandoned Park as an example. Now, with these presets, specifically with Nicholai, because you don't have a lot of traps in your deck, setting tracker mines is the #1 priority for your preset, as well as lockdown traps in the areas that have a lot of doors. While you're shooting at survivors, more often than not, they're not going to be paying attention to the floor very often. So if we look at where I've got these traps set up, pretty much on the other side of most doors, and in most areas where you have 2 different options of travel, most of those areas include tracker mines and lockdown mines, with the occasional landmine in just for a little bit of diversification. But these tracker mines and lockdown traps are crucial to Nicholai's build, because we're trying to slow down the survivors while we are cycling our deck. But at the same time, these tracker mines are also going to build up our meters so we can spawn Nemesis more frequently. So another perk with this build is that we can actually get Nemesis usually an extra time compared to normal, because of how often the survivors are being tracked. So with that being said, with this build, you should be able to cycle your deck quickly, deal a ton of damage with all 3 of those barrels, and hopefully, with a proper execution, you should be able to wipe out the survivors pretty quickly. So we're going to go ahead and jump into some games, and I will show you exactly how this build performs. All right, here we go. So starting off in this hand, the very first thing that we want to do is get that efficiency mod going. And so however you need to do that, let's just go ahead and make it happen. So there's the efficiency mod. I've got the shield up. Let's go ahead and lay down a turret. Should be able to cycle through that turret pretty quickly. So we've already got somebody dropped. Now I might not be able to cycle this quickly enough. Okay, that worked.
The door is locked. You have a key.
Now the one thing that is a bit tricky about this build, there's the second knock.
Run if you can.
The amount of damage that these weapons deal is absolutely insane. So one thing that you want to pay very close attention to, as you can see, is just when you're using this high caliber rifle, it deals an absolute absurd amount of damage in this build.
My bank account, thanks.
And so eventually you'll get to a point where you can just start knocking survivors. And again, you don't even really need creatures in this build. You can sometimes use them for... You can sometimes use them to your advantage just to slow things down. But it's not always necessary. This build is incredibly powerful. This build is incredibly efficient. And there's not a whole lot of effort involved to wrap up a game that quickly.
A kitten could kill you. What else could have been expected from setting children against me?
Now, obviously, you're not going to get that level of quick damage every single run, but that's a pretty good example of what this build looks like for the majority of the matches that you're going to play. Now, as you start getting into late game, again, you now have access to those turrets. So I'm going to show you another game where we actually get into phase 2 and 3, just to show you how this build is actually going to work once you get to the later phases of the game. So we're going to queue it back up, and I will show you what it looks like in game. All right, we are downtown again. And again, that first thing we want is the efficiency mod. We actually got that pretty quickly. I'm going to go ahead and throw the energy booster. I'm going to go ahead and actually mount the turret here. I'm going to start with the air cannon. Which I wasn't able to get that off quickly. But one thing that I do is I am a huge proponent of getting my cameras back up very quickly. And one tip that I may be able to provide to you guys is that you never want to have too much pride tied up in the cameras and the accessories that you are attaching to the cameras, because when people start shutting down cameras, obviously it gives them free time. So you don't want to necessarily put yourself in that position, and it's better to just go ahead. It's better to just go ahead and take the loss of equipment by wasting it and getting out of there and cycling out of that camera to prevent them from getting time like they're getting right now. So this is a pretty coordinated group, so this might actually be the match that makes it into phase 3. So I'm getting attacked. I'm going to go ahead and cycle out because I know that I can very quickly get back into a situation where I've got my shields and everything back up. Which he's not a Dr. Tyrone, so that's going to make things a little bit trickier for him. But in this case, even though they took out this camera, I'm going to try to get it back up because Tyrone is trying to get his teammate up. And we don't want that happening. Somehow my shots are not hitting him, but okay. Ah, crap. That missed. That was bad. keep in mind, it's equally advantageous to waste their time because all we're looking for is to defeat survivors. We don't technically have to kill them because to charge up Nemesis, all you have to do is just defeat them and you get credit for reducing your Nemesis cooldown. And as soon as he breaks out, we're going to be ready for him again. Ah, I couldn't get it quite over that.
You can move to the more dangerous toys now.
All right, so he's going to be able to revive them a little bit here, which is okay. But again, defeating them is all that matters. We're going to back out so they don't get extra time on us here. Camera rotations jammed. That gives us time to lay down a couple mines, but they actually have all the keys already, so that would actually be a waste of resources. All right, so they took the camera out, but they didn't get the time, so I might be able to get this fast enough to hit them one more time before they move to the next area.
My bank account.
Looks like Martin rage quit. Feels bad, man.
Just die.
We can get out of here.
My client will be happy with the fear you feel. Be afraid, young
All right, so I do have an extra mod right now, which is good. But at this point, having the large generator mod, I'm going to go ahead and back out of this camera. I'm going to let them take it out. They didn't get the time for it. But we're wasting their resources. And in the late game, it's very important that you try to run the survivors out of their resources. Because you're not using any of the creatures or anything like that, and you have a very limited number of traps, you can make pretty efficient use of your equipment to make it all kind of come together. Now, I could have ended that easily in that last area, but I want to show you guys some of the late game stuff because this build does have some pretty interesting things that happen in the late game. And the energy booster, by the way, is going to lose some of its value here because I have this generator mod, but I can actually toss that because I have full energies at the moment. And once you have full energy, you'll start to realize that as Nicholai, you really only need to generate a lot at the very beginning. All right, so we do have Nemesis available. So we're going to go ahead and use Nemesis. Now, I don't have any buffs on Nemesis himself. However, I missed that rocket. I was a little too far to the left. One thing about Nemesis specifically, I play on PC. And one thing that's a bit tricky is aiming the rocket launcher with a controller. I'm used to doing a lot of aiming and stuff. I actually use mouse and keyboard with Survivor specifically. So unfortunately, I'm giving you a terrible representation of what using Nemesis looks like here, but you can still do some pretty big damage with Nemesis without using the rocket launcher. So one thing about Nemesis that's important to know, though, is that you can't punch and go through a door at the same time, unfortunately. All right, so Nemesis is up. Again, I'm not trying to do a ton of damage with Nemesis. A lot of the goal with Nemesis is just to keep the survivors separated. That way it's easier to pick them off a lot more slowly. Okay, so they're going to get some time for disabling that camera, but that's okay. And obviously, with them being down a Martin, it's going to make things a bit more challenging. But at this point, they're kind of wasting their own time in the situation that they're in, because January has the key.
And I will end the pain for you. First I take your sight, then I take your
So this is a
life.
situation where they're gonna probably start shooting around the corner. That's one of the exploits in this game. Don't be too proud to just go ahead and give up. Don't be too proud to give up that machine gun even though you didn't have a chance to fully use it. You get things so cheap as Nicholai with this build that it's not a big deal if you don't
Check
get
this
it.
out.
So January actually has the key, so I'm gonna continue fighting this camera because I know that they're not hacking the terminal with her using her special ability there.
You ready for this?
Now this is still okay. We now have multiple turrets throughout, and again, Jan has the key, so she's in a pretty rough spot as far as being able to handle some of these things.
You fight too long, you lose, I get paid.
And I'm not quite sure if she realizes that the terminals are nowhere near this area, but I can tell that they're running out of resources though. Alright, so Jan went ahead and got that security device taken care of. My rotation is jammed, so there's not going to be much I can do about this. Now that it's up, though, it's not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and take Jan down.
Stop resisting.
Ooh, good play by Tyrone there. Again, don't be too proud to give up those cameras.
Now I shall end this.
Don't be too proud. Alright, I've got Nemesis back, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lay down Nemesis again.
You will soon wish you died here. Get it over.
And I'm going to see if one of them is smart enough to start running to the exit. Funny how I'm doing terribly with Nemesis, but I'm going to let them go to the next area. Again, I'm kind of intentionally handicapping myself.
Stay a while. There's plenty of time.
I'm gonna go ahead and just back out of Nemesis now so I can get him up earlier later. But I'm gonna just let them go through just so you can see the machine gun turret for the remainder of this build. Again, with Martin being down, I'd say it's pretty much a guarantee that I'm gonna win this match, but for the purpose of the build video, I do want to show you guys Area 3, so...
You should be dead by now. My client will not be happy with this.
Alright, so I'm gonna start setting up these cameras so that I'm ready when they come down. I'm gonna go ahead and use the boost. I have an Ivy, why not just play it? They actually didn't even hit the biocore with the rocket launcher, so not sure how that's gonna go. I don't know that this Jill was doing what they were supposed to be doing. I'm gonna just start laying down some turrets. And the turrets are pretty much gonna take care of it from here. Once you get to Area 3, you can essentially just start laying turrets down in areas that are high traffic areas. And as long as they're not in a spot that has a high chance of exploiting walls, you should be able to get some pretty good damage off and be able to finish the match up pretty quickly in Area 3. It's not an unbeatable build, but hopefully this gives you a representation of what it looks like. More often than not, you're going to end matches with this build in Area 1, at the latest Area 2. But in the event that you do get stuck or you have a really, really good group to go to Area 3, just make sure that when you are placing turrets, you're not placing them in tight spaces where people are just going to exploit walls and take them out. You want them in open spaces where there's high traffic, and you should be able to get enough damage off to be able to end it in Area 3. So that's going to do it for this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget about channel memberships starting at $1.99 for select countries, where you can take advantage of some really cool perks. And I will look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Take care.